Sir, how is America under Trump? Is your democracy in any danger at this time?
Yes, I would say our democracy is in serious danger. In fact, I think we have slid into a mild form of authoritarianism. One of the ways to measure whether you're living in a democracy is in a democracy, there should be no risk or very little risk to publicly opposing the government. No citizen, no church leader, no university leader, no lawyer, no business leader, no NGO leader should fear government reprisals for speaking out against the government or opposing the government. And today, all of those officials are in fear of government reprisal. Journalists, media companies, business CEOs, university leaders, leaders of all sorts of civil society organizations fear government reprisal if they speak out or oppose the government. Now, they note they're not necessarily going to be killed or jailed or exiled, but they're facing various forms of legal investigations, tax investigations, government maneuvers that cost them business opportunities. People are paying a price now for opposing the government, and that's never been true across the board for American citizens before. So in just 2 months, we've slid across the line into some form of authoritarianism.
Sir, what about check and balances mechanism? Is one of the greatest in the world in your constitution.
We Americans love our system of checks and balances, and it is true that in many points in our history, our constitutional checks and balances have proven very effective. But consider the following. Donald Trump, as you all know, tried openly to overturn the results of an election in 2020. Accepting the results of an election is the cardinal rule of any democracy. You have to, if people don't accept defeat, you can't have a democracy. Trump tried to as president, tried to steal the election and instigated a violent insurrection to try to block a peaceful transfer of power. He, in effect, attempted a presidential coup. Despite that, the Congress did not use the tool, or failed to use the tool of impeachment to convict him. The U.S. Senate could have convicted him and prevented him from running again. This is exactly what the tool of impeachment was created for, and it was not used. The courts derailed all of the legal proceedings against him, and in addition declared that he had immunity for all acts that he carries out as president. And then, so that's the courts and the Congress, and then the Republican Party, despite the fact that they knew that he had directly tried to overturn an election, nominated him almost unanimously for president. So our famous checks and balances, Congress, the courts, political parties, systematically failed to hold Donald Trump accountable. So our checks and balances are not doing well.
Can Trump still be stopped somehow in the future?
He can definitely be stopped. And we were very fortunate to, first of all, have a very strong civil society, a very big, wealthy, diverse private sector, a pretty strong legal system, pretty independent courts, federalism, a strong opposition, strong united opposition party. So a number of things that didn't exist in Russia, that didn't exist in Turkey or Venezuela or El Salvador do exist in the United States. They give us the muscle in our society to fight back. And I think there are two channels in particular that will be important. One is the courts, and the other is elections. There very likely will be elections in 2026, 2028. And so the opposition needs to use all of those channels available to try to stop him. Trump is also not very popular. I mean, the most dangerous authoritarians are the ones who have vast public support, like Putin did, like Modi and Bukele and Erdogan, and to some extent Orban. Trump's not nearly as popular as those guys. He's pretty inept. So there are many opportunities to stop him. The troubling thing, though, is that so far, U.S. civil society has not responded. I think it's in shock. Americans have no experience with authoritarianism. We have no collective memory of authoritarianism, and leaders don't know how to respond. And they're very afraid. And individual civil society leaders are stepping back, stepping to the sideline, and silencing themselves rather than opposing the government. And that's not the way to defeat an authoritarian.
Why do you think his administration hates so much Europe?
Great question. This government is very illiberal. It aligns itself ideologically with the global far right. And it is really, it pains me to say this, but more sympathetic to the ideas and the practices and the postures of Putin, certainly Orban, than of liberal Democrats in the West. It's stunning to hear those words come out of my mouth, but that's true. What Putin is doing, I only exaggerate a little in saying that what Trump is doing with respect to Putin is kind of like if Roosevelt had said in 1939, we're going to support Germany and not the Allies. It's an extraordinary about face, and the only thing I can attribute it to is the fact that Trump and the people who surround him are ideologically closer to Russia than to liberal democracies. It's unusual, and I would say deeply inappropriate for high-level figures in the U.S. government to openly champion certain candidates in an election, as we did in Germany, as we did in Romania, but to do so on behalf of far-right, illiberal, arguably neo-Nazi figures is just extraordinary. But that is evidence that this government is more closely aligned with the sort of broadly pro-Russia far right than it is with liberal democracies across the world, than it is with Canada, than it is with Japan, Western Europe.
What do you think about what was happening in Romania? Are you aware of canceling the election and stuff like this?
Yeah, that was a really hard call. And anytime that you cancel an election, you are dealing a powerful blow against democratic institutions. There's no avoiding that. That said, there, from what I can tell, and I'm not an expert on Romania, pretty good evidence that external interference had contributed in a very important way, and that illegal interference had affected the election outcome. So Romania is still a young democracy. It was sort of on its own with facing a really, really difficult situation, and it's the courts faced a lose-lose situation. Romanian democracy was going to suffer no matter what path was followed. I don't know enough to say which one was best. All I know is it's crucial. If you take a step like canceling elections, it is really important that you take really careful and steps to immediately hold a high-quality, competitive new election.
What do you think about the Atlantic episode with the chatting on Signal?
This government is many things. It's very dangerous. It's very authoritarian. It's very far right, but it's also very incompetent. This is a clown show of a government. Pete Hegseth has no experience. He's not even a very good television commentator. The fact that our institutions, that the entire Republican Party allowed him to become Secretary of Defense, suggests that these are not serious people, and that right now we don't have a serious government and we're rapidly becoming an unserious country. But this was total ineptitude, but you should expect total ineptitude when you make a clown the defense secretary.
And my last question is regarding transatlantic connection. Do you think could be restored somehow in the future?
It's really hard for me to say, in part because I'm not an expert in international relations, and political scientists are notoriously terrible about predicting the future. I think yes and no. I think that it's entirely possible that the U.S. will elect a minimally normal pro-Western government in 2028. That continues to be a possibility. Almost, certainly any leader of the Democratic Party, if they were elected president, would prioritize relations with Europe, with our friends. But I think it's now clear, or it should be clear, to every European that the relationship is never going to be the same again, that the Europeans cannot rely on the United States to be the hegemonic force in the liberal West. I mean, the liberal West, the United States for many, many decades, as you know, has been the dominant military, economic, and ideological force in the liberal West. And right now, the leader of the liberal West has just switched sides. And it can never again be a perfectly reliable, trusted partner. It may be back on, it may switch sides back, but Europe is going to have to reconfigure itself. It's going to have to find a new leader. It's going to have to lead itself. It's going to have to arm itself. And it's going to have to reposition itself for a world in which the United States may or may not be an ally.